Hello, and welcome to a Saturday morning edition of It's Just Me. Of course, I'm Brent Fox. Now, I'm going to wind up moving the show to Saturdays because it's more conducive to the schedule that I actually have now. So we'll look for content on Saturdays. And of course, I'll just go ahead and make sure that I make an official post that we are moving to Saturdays. Now, having said that, I'll go over a few boxing topics, and that shall be it. First topic that I want to discuss is last week's performance with Abdullah Mason versus Albert Prince Bell, or for those that are actually familiar, Prince Albert Bell. Now, of course, he had to change it to Albert Prince Bell due to legal reasons, but of course, those familiar with Albert Bell call him Prince Albert Bell. So, Um, in this particular matchup, which was a good one by the way, I think the DAZN and TNT merger should be successful just kind of based off of this. The attendance was actually pretty good. There were over 9,000 people that actually showed up in Cleveland to be in person and support this particular fight. You have two very very talented and very skilled fighters from the state of Ohio representing themselves very well in this one. And I think that, you know, as a result, boxing has won. Now, this does actually put Abdullah Mason on another level. And it's not because and it's not just because he actually had a late round stoppage or anything of that nature. I think it was because he was able to show true championship pedigree by being able to adjust when things were not working initially and then being able to finish. Although I do have some thoughts on that and I'll discuss it later. But he was, in the record books, he was actually able to go ahead and finish. Now, what I will say is Prince Albert Bell or Albert Prince Bell, however you want to name him, was able to implement an effective strategy the first half of the fight. Now, if you want to give or take a round out of those first 6 rounds, sure, you know, boxing, along with any type of other art form, is subjective. And then certain people actually look for certain things. So, okay. I think that he was very effective being able to land sharp, accurate shots that gave Abdullah Mason pause. I don't think he ever hurt him, but I do think that he actually did make Abdullah Mason reconsider his strategy initially. So that's effective. Okay. I wouldn't say that it's effective aggression, but I would say that it was an effective strategy for whom Prince Albert Bell is, or Albert Prince Bell is. And again, that he is a gentleman that is able to set up sharp, accurate shots for people that actually try to come in on him and try to be overly aggressive. Now, that strategy did work initially again, but I think that when Abdullah was able to attack the body more, then of course he was able to effectively go upstairs or to the head area and be effective there. And then, of course, that led up to the stoppage in the last round. Now, again, I think that it's very, very important that we take time to recognize a 22-year-old champion who is currently the youngest champion in boxing was able to make those type of adjustments. And shouts out to Abdullah's father, Valiant. I'm sorry, Valiant Mason, and that is such a cool name too. Valiant Mason was able to actually get Abdullah in line and inspired him to get out there and execute the game plan. Now, with any type of father-son relationship, there are going to be occasions to where the son may not respond well to that type of motivation. But shouts out to the Mason family who were able just to kind of be supportive, but also were able to just kind of execute what needs to be done in order to win the fight. So shouts out to them. And I think the Mason brothers were 3-0 that night, so that worked out very well. But I think that the future is very bright for young Abdullah Mason, and honestly, I can't wait to see what's next at 135 pounds for him. So, we'll look forward to whomever he chooses to get in a ring with and go from there. All right. Speaking of people choosing to get in a ring with whomever, Shakur Stevenson has actually signed with Zuffa Boxing. Zuffa, not Zuffa, Shannon Sharp. And if you haven't seen it yet, there is a somewhat of a, I guess, interview, if you want to call it that. I call it a very strong interaction between he and Shakur Stevenson, in which Shakur Stevenson had given Shannon Sharp an F for not doing his homework as far as the sport of boxing. Now, what I will say is that unfortunately, Shannon Sharp has earned that grade several times with several head scratching takes about the sport. And clearly, he's just not very well educated on it for the time being. Right now, he's not very educated on it. But what I will say to his credit is he was very honest about how he felt about Shakur's style. Now, what I will say as a boxing, I don't want to call myself a boxing purist, but what I will say as someone who has reverence for the actual sweet science of boxing, I don't find anything wrong per se with Shakur's style. Unfortunately, we live in the microwave age to where people don't actually respect processes, and honestly, because of that, people are not really going to respect. People are not really going to respect. How am I going to say it? People just really don't respect the art of boxing. I'll just put it that way. The boxing is basically, yes, while it is hitting and not getting hit, boxing could mean several things. Boxing, like Abdullah Mason, and I'll use for an example, is being able to make adjustments and put in a winning strategy when things aren't working out initially. Boxing is actually figuring out a way to take away someone's strengths and then utilize your own strengths while you're taking their strengths away. Or, on the opposite side, exploiting a weakness in your opponent and then being able to capitalize off that. Boxing doesn't necessarily mean, while it does mean that yes, you want to hit and not get hit, boxing has several connotations, in which I've already explained. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to move around the ring like Ali did and avoid getting hit and all of that other good stuff in order for you to effectively box. Now, the reason I'm explaining it this way is because Max Kellerman has yet again overstepped and has basically challenged the idea of whether or not Abdullah Mason can box. I just think that Mike Coppinger, and Todd Gresham, and yeah, let me not exclude the former fighter Sergio Mora. there are some takes that Coppinger and Gresham and Kellerman may have that are laughable, because of the lack of understanding. And then, of course, these guys, I I, I almost can guarantee you guys, that these people have never been punched in their face in their life. Um, I think that it would be quote unquote very traumatic for them if someone were to actually just feed them a nice right hand. I just don't know if those guys would be able to take something like that. Um, and if you want to do a Diddy joke about that, I don't care. What I would say is that for Sergio Mora to have the experience that he actually has in the ring and then still come up with some of these questionable takes, I just don't know. And I understand that he's trying to probably do that to keep a job or something of that nature, or he's built a reputation of saying outlandish things, and then that's part of his shtick or whatever. But you're doing a disservice to the people, to your brother and sisters in the sport when you kind of say ridiculous things. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Now, before anyone actually questions me, I have had 20 years of boxing experience. I have done everything except actual competition. Everything except actual competition. And when I say everything, that does include sparring. So I have done everything but compete. So I definitely know what I'm talking about. And I definitely do homework as far as the art of boxing, is what I actually call it. I don't really I try to avoid referring to it as a sport, but because I think it's more or less an art. You do have a chance to actually create with the you have a chance to actually create using your hands, and also more importantly your mind. Your mind and body actually have to work together in order for you to be successful in there. And then of course it's nobody but you in there in the ring as well. So yeah, those particular variables make boxing a very important art to me, at least. Now, what I would also probably want to add or mention is this: there there are countless styles in boxing, and just because someone's style is not appeasing to, I would probably say, casuals that don't know any better, doesn't mean that they're a terrible fighter. Um, and with that in mind, Shakur Stevenson has actually signed to Zuffa. Um, I think that is probably, while that may actually be somewhat, and let him tell it's a great career move, and then he'll be able to quote unquote fight anybody he wants and not be limited and all that other stuff. Okay, we shall see. Um, what I will say is that I do look forward to seeing Shakur Stevenson fight again. Whom he fights, we shall see. He did do a masterful job against Teofimo Lopez this January. Ironically, the racist face of boxing, Teofimo Lopez, is fighting Rolly Romero. I do not know or do not care what date they're actually fighting. Um, and I hate the fact that I actually have to mention this particular individual anyway. He and Ryan Garcia are going to forever be on my SHIT list, because of their racist rhetoric and just just deplorable behavior in general. Um, And I see that T.O., or I've heard, because I did not bother to watch the press conference, it's not worth my time. When I say that I am not fooling with those particular people, I am not fooling with those particular people. And that is just going to be the stand I have to take. So even if Devin Haney or Shakur Stevenson winds up fighting Ryan Garcia, I can't support that. Or if, of course, Devin gets a rematch with Ryan, which is not very likely to happen, I probably would not be able to. I would probably not be able to really support that. Now, I may be able to support the individual fighter like Devin Haney or Shakur Stevenson by purchasing merchandise or something of that nature, or donating to a channel that they may have, something of that nature. But as far as actually supporting the fight, or doing pay-per-view or something of that nature, I'm sorry, gentlemen, I just cannot support racist in any form or fashion, even if they are the ones that are in there getting beat up. And I thoroughly enjoyed watching Teofimo Lopez get his ass whooped in that ring. I would thoroughly enjoy Devin Haney whooping Teofimo's ass once he actually has the courage to get in the ring with Haney. I don't know. And then, of course, again, what's less likely to happen is Ryan Garcia does not take Super Soldier Serum for an advantage and does not break weight. I think that if he comes in overweight, the fight's canceled. And I would probably imagine that if he does come in overweight, he will be heavily fined. And that, of course, would probably affect whatever purse he actually gets. So I would hope that if there is a second fight, then Garcia would be on his best behavior. But since he's shown that he's untrustworthy, I highly doubt that. Now, speaking of other people, I think that the Zuffa move may actually be good for Shakur. I think individually. I certainly hope that it does actually give him the options that he's been bragging about, basically, and that we are able to see some of these fights that the public demands. Yes, you did a masterful job against Teofimo Lopez, and yes, there was a public demand for that. So okay, good on you. Again, we shall see what you actually wind up doing. Of course, the fight, and I don't care how somebody like Chris Maddox tries to downplay it or something of that nature. The fight is him and Devin Haney squaring off. That is a fight that the boxing public, people that actually watch boxing and study boxing, would love to be able to see. So that fight should be upcoming, and since there are quote unquote no more excuses, then that fight should happen by the end of the year, let's hope, or the beginning or the very beginning of next year, at the very latest. So we shall see. We shall see. I think that now that all of the boxing promotions, the big boxing promotions, are actually under one umbrella now with DAZN, fights could actually get made. So, I would definitely hope to see more interpromotional matchups. So, I would love that. Now, having said that, I think that Devin Haney is going to wind up fighting Keyshawn Davis. But I think after that Davis fight, the Shakur Stevenson fight needs to immediately be re-explored. Now, I'm not talking like Keyshawn Davis does not have any chance to beat Devin Haney, but it's less likely. And to be quite honest with you, with that particular matchup, I do kind of fear for Devin Haney. And it's not to have anything to do with the actual boxing. I think that if Keyshawn starts losing, he's basically going to crash out. I think he'll pull a 96 Mike Tyson and do something to get himself disqualified. We've seen that a little bit with Naeem Albright, where he picked him up and body slammed him. Now, I do not think that he's going to get away with that with Devin Haney, but I do think that Keyshawn, once he starts losing and feels like he can't come back and win the fight, I think that he's going to get himself disqualified. So I would probably look for that. And if that were to happen, I think Keyshawn Davis's boxing career could effectively be over. He would definitely have a start from square one situation because of the situation with him and Norfolk, and he and his brothers assaulting Nair Albright because he beat his brother Kelvin Davis. That's all it amounted to. And then, of course, Keyshawn being unprofessional and ironically calling himself the businessman by not making weight and not fighting Edwin De Los Santos, who I think last weekend or the weekend before wound up getting knocked out by El Rayo. So shouts out to El Rayo for actually winning that particular fight via stoppage. That's at 135. Keyshawn is now all the way up at 147. So, it is what it is with that. I honestly think that I don't know why I'm talking about this particular person. So, Gervonta Tank Davis has thrown, I guess, his name back in boxing news, stating that, of course, he's going to try to fight early 2027. I don't think that he'll, quote unquote, be ready for a fight at the end of 2026. Of course, there were several rumors floating around saying that Tank would try and fight Devin Haney. But those particular rumors were pretty much flatlined after internet exchange was pretty much broadcast all over, I guess, whatever platforms. It just was basically saying that they're, that of course they're not going to fight and all of that other stuff. I think that Tank is going to try to do weight stipulations, but honestly, I don't really think that he's in too much of a position to demand something like that, especially with the legal issues that he's been having and, effectively costing himself a mega fight with Jake Paul. So, yeah, I think now he's pretty much forced to, in order to get the bag that he desires, to actually fight the best in his era. Now, unfortunately, what I'm also hearing is that he is petitioning to try to fight Jesse Bam Rodriguez, whom fights at, I would say, 118, possibly 122 pounds at the very most. I think it's 118 if I'm not mistaken. This man fights at 118 pounds. You have fought as high as 140 pounds. This again is just something that he, and when I say he, I'm talking about Tank Davis, is actually just trying to pull out to both save face and keep himself relevant. Both of which I think is failing miserably. Until Gervonta Tank Davis decides that he wants to push his skills and abilities to another level and then fight actual competition, I don't think people are really going to take him seriously. Now, people do actually show up or talk about Tank when he gets ready to fight someone, but there is just basically who's Tank gonna knock out next and all this other stuff. I don't think that there's been a matchup that Tank Davis has had that was like, oh, he could lose his fight, and that definitely includes Ryan Garcia. I knew when that fight actually got made that unfortunately Tank was going to win that fight via stoppage because Ryan has so many defensive deficiencies. Now, and then also to Tank's credit, he was actually able to weight drain Ryan to just kind of enforce the fact that if he takes a hard punch from Tank Davis, he may not be able to recover as well as he would if he were properly hydrated and at a better and at a weight that was actually closer to his actual walk around weight. But you got to quote unquote do what you got to do. So okay, whatever. And then this, then it turns out that Ryan became basically a racist drug cheat, and the rest, I guess, is history. But I don't know. I cannot support neither that person or the other guy, which is of course Teofimo Lopez, who is a blatant racist, and because of that, and I used to be a fan of Teofimo Lopez, so this doesn't come at a whim, or it doesn't come easy. But once you discover that you're a fan of somebody that doesn't even value you as a human being, you shouldn't support that person anyway. So there's that. I'm trying to think of any other type of boxing news. Yes, Teofimo is actually fighting Rolly Romero. I'm really not going to give that too much publication because of what I just said about Teofimo. Not a big fan of Rolly either. Oh, wow. I do kind of wonder what O'Shaquie Foster's next move may be. That may be interesting. I would love to watch him be able to maybe unify at 130 pounds. Or if Shakur doesn't have a dance partner, he could always fight O'Shaquie Foster. But we'll see. We shall see. I think that is pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of It's Just Me. I am Brent Fox, and I will holler at y'all the next time.